I was watching the movie and I kept thinking about where's the camera placed. I mean, we see shots of you, Curt, a couple times with the camera, but then we see 2 helicopters and there's obviously like a 3rd one. Like, can you talk a little bit about how many cameras you have shooting at all times and things like that?
Yeah, like, so we'll have typically 1 or 2 helmet camera systems running at all times. We roll with a Phantom HD, and then eventually a Phantom Flex, so for our high-speed images. And then, you know, kind of the camera that changed the way I look at cinematography was the Cineflex. It's actually it's a 14-inch gimbal system. It has 5 gyros. It's stabilized. It's controlled by the military. Apparently, it can launch a missile. That's kind of interesting. You know, to be able to get down and get into the action so fast, like, you know, you can put this camera on the helicopter and you can get these rock solid images, as well as like cars, trucks, snowmobiles, and you know, there's at any given time we had about 7 cameras shooting, and I typically look at like 2 of the cameras as you know, the creative solution, and I look at about 5 of the cameras as you know, security, and it's kind of crazy, but you know, there's when, like, if for instance Travis is trying these like crazy triple cork tricks or whatever, you know, like, we have to, if we miss this trick, we're missing a piece of history and this can't be done again. So we have to document it perfectly, and you know, it's a little over the top, but we always try to make sure we have multiple coverage on all scenarios, and then mixing all these formats is the biggest nightmare in the entire world. And,
yeah,
I think Curt could probably speak to that.
Curt, do you want to speak to that for a little bit about, you know, doing the color and the color correction and working with all these formats?
Yeah, well, as Curt mentioned, there were multiple formats. So you got, you know, Phantom, Cineflex, Red, and all these cameras have different color signs to them. So the raw image may, you know, look wildly different from shot to shot, although it's the same event, the same moment. And in the edit, you're using, you know, many cameras for one scene. So a big part of my job is trying to make those all look consistent and, you know, fit the look that Curt wants to achieve. So you know, it's a bit of a challenge. Some of the cameras tend to respond differently, have different latitudes in its acquisition, but you know, these guys did an amazing job, and I feel pretty lucky for this project to have fallen in my lap.
Carrie, how was using the Dolby Professional Reference Monitor in your process?
Organic branding.
That's what
No, it was seriously the coolest thing ever. I mean, this monitor, for me, you know, from more of a layman's standpoint on the monitor, to be totally honest, it was like, you have a monitor that can you know, I would call it like the chameleon, because you can emulate an LCD, a plasma, you know, CRT, and all of these different monitors that, like, because I'm always like, oh god, like I told Gary, I was like, we need to set up like a plasma and an LCD, and like kind of like, because they all have such different like visual experiences, and these guys are like, well, you just hit the button on this monitor, and like it does that. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah, the monitor, I mean, had such a amazing resolution quality, and I mean, you guys shot really high production value. You know, it wasn't just a shoot from the hip camcorder kind of thing. So to be able to color grade in, you know, on a monitor that really represents the resolution at, you know, at such a high level was pretty special.
Cool. Thanks. Anyone else have any questions out there? Okay.
No disrespect to the safety guy, but there seems to be very little evidence of safety. I have a question.
That's because we were drinking the whole time.
Avalanche, when the hill gives way, what's the strategy? So this is 2 questions. Is it straight, left, right? You were in Patagonia, right, Mark?
Talk to Clark, too. Clark
anyone,
he's the one responsible.
We'll go with both of them. Yeah, whatever your question is.
I
every situation is different. Every slope that we go to and every line we do, we assess the face, whether that takes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, a couple minutes. You know, we do our homework and strategically find landmarks throughout the, you know, the slope to help us if anything happens. Like, so what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that every situation is different. Sometimes, you know, you're gonna want to cut right if anything pops. So you're gonna want. I mean, there's no set formula, and that's what the toughest thing about it is. And I think the hardest thing about it is trying to turn that little mental button off in your head and you know, just push through all that bullshit.
He's the one that got slid in the movie too, and you know, that's a situation that you really just don't plan for those situations. Well, you plan for them, but you hope that they don't
You
arise.
definitely plan for it, because I mean, in my preliminary kind of breakdown of the line, I told myself that if anything happened, I'm gonna shoot to the right and try to tackle this tree, because I knew if I went over the falls on this particular line, that I was gonna get crunched between these two rocks. They were probably 50 feet up in the air, so it would have taken, if they could have gotten to me, at least probably over an hour or something, you know, way too long. And so I knew that thing in the back of my head was to pretty much essentially tackle these trees that were on my right, and either hang onto the trees or else, you know, get sucked down into the valley to the right like I did, which is what I wanted, but not to get flipped off the cliff. Like that happened at the end. That wasn't part of the plan. But you know, every situation's different, and it's all an assessment of the slope, the conditions, not only the conditions of the day, but the whole year. You know, leading up to that. So, Clark.
Let me set Clark up. Let me set Clark up because he's a safety guy, but he has a tricky position because he's a safety guy, and if it was just a normal heli skier, he'd say don't go there. But he's dealing with professional athletes, and these guys are the best in the world. So he has to kind of play this card of these guys are really good. They can do amazing things. They're superheroes. So he has to kind of judge. We're pushing the limits here. I want to help these guys push the limits, but at the same time, I want to help them be safe. So let Clark talk beyond that.
Clark?
Yeah, I've been set up already by multiple people already.
Well, let's start by telling Clark's story.
And let's tell them the story of how we got
this is worth hearing.
Okay, we'll go more setup, I guess.
No, just a little more setup. Okay, so, is this okay?
Essentially, we got Clark fired. Well, Travis did, if you want to break it down.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll tell you real quick.
Long
Just
story.
the quick and dirty is that Travis jumped out of that helicopter in Alaska. And apparently that's not extremely legal, but the pilot said it was okay. Clark was just kind of like, I think maybe it's okay. I mean, I don't know. It's Travis Rice, you know. And the long story short, we got a little scare from the FAA. Apparently they kind of run things, and the pilot apparently was going to get fired. I don't know if he ended up officially getting fired. Clark got fired, which was pretty interesting. And he was like the lead guy to one of the biggest operations in Alaska.
For 7 years?
For 7 years. And so I thought that was total, what they call BS. And I said, you know, like this guy's the best in the world. We clicked with him and we said, you know, this was for the best, Clark. So Clark's now on the brain farm team, which is cool.
So now you're full-time, or you never know, really
full-time safety slash life consultant.
Yeah.
Well, no, this is not related to avalanches. Also, you go ahead.
I was going to say, just to answer your question, I've been set up multiple times here already, so my 2 cents in here. But yeah, I mean, what these guys do is truly, you know, it's well beyond what, you know, anyone can expect. So like I get this question a lot, like, you know, it looks dangerous. There's actually a tremendous amount of safety that's put into it. You know, for instance, you know, in the Alaska shoot, which is the first 20 or 18 minutes of the movie, we were there for 3 weeks. You know, the slopes we were going to, there's a tremendous amount of effort and analysis that goes into all those slopes. What I've been doing for 12 years or so, and been on a bunch of productions throughout my whole life, or through my whole career. And it's a hard line, like those guys were saying. I mean, you can have, like, I do a bunch of guiding for, clientele. So if you guys come to Alaska or come someone and pay me a bunch of money, then it's a very different story. I will actually tell you what to do. But when I have, like, Mark Landvik or I have Travis Rice being like, hey, I want to go gap over that 100-foot crevasse and do a double cork over it, I can be like, well, that absolutely is not safe, 100%. I'll tell you that, for sure. But once again, we have the best athletes on the planet, So it's one of those things, and there's many times, well, Mark will be a little bit mean and be like, hey, what do you think? What I like to call myself is more a consultant than be like a person to say, like, you should or should not do that, because, again, I can in the end be like, hey, I said, I didn't think
he's
it was
not the
safe.
safety judge.
No, it's more like, I think the snow is going to react like that. You might want to watch out for that crevasse because the fall line goes into that crevasse. So if you do get in a situation, you're going to pull right or left. Or if there's a cliff that you're going to go over, if you get pulled over that direction and whatnot. So it's a...
Sounds like a pretty challenging job.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. I mean, because once again, we got the best crew in the world, and we got the best riders in the world. So
Yeah.
You had a follow-up to that?
Hard to
Well, it's unrelated as well, I guess Avalanche is a vectors too. The whole vector kind of graphic that you started at the beginning, I just wanted to sort of get the creative thinking behind that.
It's all based off triangulation. Triangulation is how you find flight path. So it had, I would call it like a subliminal, deep-rooted, creative form from the graphic standpoint. But all of that, all based off of triangulation and the flight path. So that's really kind of how it came into play. It actually started off very 3D and bubbly and very gimmicky. And I spent probably 2 months building the graphics for the film, and in the last 2 weeks of the film, I made the team delete everything and start over and go with a very, very thin, very subtle approach to it, which is kind of sucked because there was some super cool, like, amazing 3D, imaging and shadow casting, and I for some reason was just like, this is just over the top, so we just went with something very clean and simple for the graphic package.
Cool. It was.